The double dungeon was supposed to be a death trap, a cruel, hidden joke played by the architects of a world that thrived on blood and levels. Within the Cartenon Temple, the air was thick with the copper tang of fresh blood and the oppressive, ancient magic radiating from the colossal stone statues lining the walls. The survivors of the raiding party cowered, their spirits broken by the sight of the god statue, a monolithic entity whose smile was a jagged chasm of divine malice. And as the statue's gargantuan stone palm descended to crush the final remaining hunter, the sound wasn't a wet thud of bone on stone. It was a thunderous, ear-splitting crack of reinforced granite meeting something far more immovable. The god statue's hand didn't just stop, it disintegrated. Shards of ancient, mana-infused stone exploded outward, embedding themselves like shrapnel into the temple walls. Standing beneath the pulverized wrist was a man who looked entirely out of place in a world of enchanted armor and glowing mana blades. He was bald, dressed in a plain yellow jumpsuit with a white cape that flapped lazily in the sudden shockwave, and wearing red dishwashing gloves that didn't have a single scratch on them. Saitama looked up at the headless arm of the statue, his expression one of profound, soul-crushing disappointment. He didn't look like an S-rank hunter, for he didn't radiate the jagged, terrifying aura of a monarch. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd left his stove on. "Is this it?" Saitama asked, his voice flat and unimpressed. The sign outside said, "Danger, extreme mana density." I thought this was finally going to be a boss fight, but it's just more rocks. The survivors stared, their mouths agape. Song Chi-yul, a veteran C rank, felt his knees buckle. He couldn't sense any magic from the man. To his hunter senses, Saitama was a void. An E-rank nobody who shouldn't have been able to survive the initial door opening, let alone shatter the most terrifying entity they had ever encountered with a casual upward shrug. The god statue, driven by a rigid, ancient programming, didn't feel fear. It simply reacted. Its remaining hand swept across the floor in a massive arc, intended to clear the vermin from its sanctuary. Saitama didn't dodge. He didn't cast a defensive spell. He just stood there, his hand reaching into a plastic grocery bag he was somehow still holding. "I'm going to be late for the Saturday sale at the supermarket," Saitama muttered. He threw a casual, horizontal punch. There was no flashy magic circle, no incantation, and no elemental discharge. There was only the sound of the atmosphere itself being torn asunder. The shock wave from the punch didn't just hit the god statue, it deleted it. The temple's rear wall, the massive throne, and the mountain of stone above them were instantly hollowed out, leaving a clean, circular tunnel stretching miles into the distance, revealing the blue sky of the Korean countryside beyond. As the dust settled, Saitama looked at his red glove, then back at the terrified, trembling hunters. "Hey, do you guys know the way to the exit? I think I took a wrong turn at the subway station, and I'm looking for the Great Value Mart. If you're hungry for tales of what-if scenarios that shake the foundations of the 41st millennium, hit subscribe and join the crusade for more content." Narratively, the world of solo leveling operated on a strict hierarchy. Power was measured in numerical values, and awakening was a permanent ceiling. But as Saitama stepped over the rubble of a divine entity, the system, that invisible, omnipotent force that governed this reality, began to flicker. For the first time in its existence, it encountered a variable that wasn't just off the charts. It was the end of the chart itself. The Korean Hunter Association's headquarters was a fortress of glass, steel, and high-frequency mana shielding. Usually the atmosphere was one of hushed professionalism, but today the air felt brittle. In the center of the main testing hall stood the Mark II Mana Induction Pylon, a device designed to withstand the raw output of a national-level hunter. Saitama stood in the middle of the containment circle, picking at a loose thread on his cape. Around him, Her high-speed cameras and mana-sensitive sensors hummed, monitored by dozens of panicked technicians behind 3-inch thick leaded glass. "Please, Mr. Saitama." Go Gun-hee's voice came over the intercom, sounding strained. "Just give us a sample of your power. A single strike against the pylon. Do not hold back." "I'm telling you, I don't really have magic," Saitama said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "I just did a lot of push-ups. Are you sure this thing won't break? It looks expensive." "It is designed to absorb the kinetic and magical energy of a tactical nuclear strike," the technician replied snidely. "Just hit it, E-rank." Saitama sighed, stepped forward, and gave the pylon a light, bored tap with his fist. It was the kind of punch a person might use to test if a door was sturdy. The pylon didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist. The 10-ton pillar of reinforced mana crystal was reduced to a cloud of subatomic glitter in a microsecond. The shockwave, and even from such a casual movement, bypassed the induction shields entirely. The leaded glass of the observation deck shattered instantly, sending Go Gun-hee and the staff diving for cover as the building's foundations groaned like a dying beast. High above, the system, the invisible architect of the solo-leveling world, was screaming in digital agony. Warning, logical paradox detected. Calculating physical force. Infinity. Calculating mana consumption. 0. Status. System overload. Manual intervention required. "Oops," Saitama said, looking at the empty space where the pylon had been. "I told you it looked flimsy." Go Gun-hee stood up, brushing glass shards from his suit, his face pale. He looked at the readings on the one surviving monitor. It didn't show an S-rank value. It showed a string of N/A symbols, followed by a total system crash. "Mr. Saitama," Go Gun-hee said, his voice trembling with a mix of awe and terror. "You are not an E-rank, but the system, it cannot see you. To the world, you are a ghost, a false E-rank of impossible proportions." "Does that mean I get the license?" Saitama asked, his eyes brightening. "I heard hunters get huge discounts on public transport and at certain grocery chains." Yes, you will get the license," Go Gun-hee whispered. "But God help us all when the other S-ranks find out you're here." Meanwhile, across the city in a small hospital room, Sung Jin-woo sat upright in his bed. The blue screens in front of him were flickering wildly, red warning text bleeding over his quest logs. Emergency quest, investigate the anomaly. Reward, survival. Penalty for failure, death. Jin-woo looked at his hands, which were now glowing with a faint, dark energy. He was the player, the one chosen to grow and eventually lead. But as he looked at the quest, he felt a cold dread he hadn't felt since the double dungeon. And the system wasn't asking him to hunt a monster. It was asking him to investigate a man who had just punched a hole in the rules of the universe. "Who is this guy?" Jin-woo whispered to the empty room. The answer came not in words, but in a distant, muffled thoom. The sound of Saitama accidentally closing a door too hard back at the association. The Korean Hunter Association's headquarters was a fortress of glass, steel, and high-frequency mana shielding. Usually the atmosphere was one of hushed professionalism, but today the air felt brittle. In the center of the main testing hall stood the Mark II mana induction pylon, a device designed to withstand the raw output of a national-level hunter. Saitama stood in the middle of the containment circle, picking at a loose thread on his cape. Around him, her high-speed cameras and mana-sensitive sensors hummed, monitored by dozens of panicked technicians behind 3-inch thick leaded glass. "Please, Mr. Saitama." Go Gun-hee's voice came over the intercom, sounding strained. "Just give us a sample of your power. A single strike against the pylon. Do not hold back." "I'm telling you, I don't really have magic," Saitama said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. I just did a lot of push-ups. Are you sure this thing won't break? It looks expensive. It is designed to absorb the kinetic and magical energy of a tactical nuclear strike, a technician replied snidely. Just hit it, E-rank. Saitama sighed, stepped forward, and gave the pylon a light, bored tap with his fist. It was the kind of punch a person might use to test if a door was sturdy. The pylon didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist. The 10-ton pillar of reinforced mana crystal was reduced to a cloud of subatomic glitter in a microsecond. The shockwave, and even from such a casual movement, bypassed the induction shields entirely. The leaded glass of the observation deck shattered instantly, sending Go-Gun-Hee and the staff diving for cover as the building's foundations groaned like a dying beast. High above, the system, the invisible architect of the solo-leveling world, was screaming in digital agony. Warning, logical paradox detected. Calculating physical force. Infinity. Calculating mana consumption. 0. Status. System overload. Manual intervention required. Oops, Saitama said, looking at the empty space where the pylon had been. I told you it looked flimsy. Go-Gun-Hee stood up, brushing glass shards from his suit, his face pale. He looked at the readings on the one surviving monitor. It didn't show an S-rank value. It showed a string of N/A symbols, followed by a total system crash. Mr. Saitama, Go-Gun-Hee said, his voice trembling with a mix of awe and terror. You are not an E-rank, but the system, it cannot see you. To the world, you are a ghost, a false E-rank of impossible proportions. Does that mean I get the license? Saitama asked, his eyes brightening. I heard hunters get huge discounts on public transport and at certain grocery chains. Yes, you will get the license, Go-Gun-Hee whispered. But God help us all when the other S-ranks find out you're here. Meanwhile, across the city in a small hospital room, Jin-woo sat upright in his bed. The blue screens in front of him were flickering wildly, red warning text bleeding over his quest logs. Emergency quest, investigate the anomaly. Reward, survival. Penalty for failure, death. Jin-woo looked at his hands, which were now glowing with a faint, dark energy. He was the player, the one chosen to grow and eventually lead. But as he looked at the quest, he felt a cold dread he hadn't felt since the double dungeon. And the system wasn't asking him to hunt a monster. It was asking him to investigate a man who had just punched a hole in the rules of the universe. Who is this guy? Jin-woo whispered to the empty room. The answer came not in words, but in a distant, muffled thoom. The sound of Saitama accidentally closing a door too hard back at the association. The rumor mill in the hunter community was a vicious, lightning-fast beast. Within 24 hours, the story of the bald ghost had bypassed the association's gag orders and reached the ears of Korea's elite. An E-rank had walked into the Cartenon Temple and walked out alone while the god's statue was reduced to gravel. To the S-rank hunters, the kings of the modern world, this was either a hilarious hoax or a direct challenge to their sovereignty. And at the training grounds of the Hunters Guild, Cha-Hai-In, Korea's only female S-rank, and a woman whose nose could literally smell the scent of mana, stood frozen. She wasn't looking at her training dummies. She was looking toward the association building miles away. What is that? She whispered, her hand trembling on the hilt of her sword. What's what, Hei-In? Choi Jong-in, the ultimate soldier and master of fire magic, stepped up beside her, adjusting his glasses. The association's just running some tests on a new recruit. Go-Gun-Hee's being unusually secretive about it. It's not mana, Hai-In said, her voice tight with confusion. Every hunter has a scent. Some are like roses, some are like rotting meat, but that direction, it smells like absolutely nothing. It's a vacuum. It's like someone cut a hole in the world and forgot to fill it. Before Choi could respond, a figure appeared at the gates of the training facility. So he was wearing a yellow jumpsuit that looked like it had been bought at a clearance sale, a white cape that was slightly stained with coffee, and a pair of red boots that squeaked with every step. Saitama looked around the state-of-the-art facility, unimpressed by the glowing magic circles and the hunters practicing high-tier spells. He held a crumpled map in one hand and his new shiny E-rank hunter license in the other. "Excuse me," Saitama said, wandering onto the field. "And I'm looking for the beginner's quest board. The guy at the desk said I should check in with a guild to find some low-level slimes or something to pay for my water bill." The training ground went silent. Dozens of A-rank and B-rank hunters turned to stare at the intruder. "Hey, Baldy," a hulking B-rank tank shouted, stepping forward. "This is a private S-rank facility. E-ranks use the public gym across town. Scram before you get singed by a stray fireball." Saitama blinked, his face remaining perfectly neutral. "Oh, sorry. I'll just go. Is the public gym near a supermarket? I'm still looking for that sale." "Wait," Cha Hai-in called out, her voice cutting through the laughter of the other hunters. She walked toward Saitama, her eyes sharp. As she got closer, the nothingness she smelled became overwhelming. It was terrifying. It was the scent of an apex predator that didn't even realize it was hunting. "You were at the double dungeon. You're the one they're calling the false E-rank." "I'm just Saitama," he replied. "And it's not false." "The machine said E. I'm pretty sure it's official." "Spar with me," Hai-in said, drawing her blade. The air around her shimmered as her S-rank mana flared, a golden aura of pure physical perfection. "If you're really an E-rank, you won't even see me move. If you're something else, I want to know what." Choi Jong-in frowned. "Hai-in, don't be ridiculous. Aunt, you'll kill him." "He won't die," she said, her instincts screaming at her to be careful. Saitama sighed, dropping his grocery bag gently on the grass. "Fine, but just for a minute. I really don't want to break your sword. It looks expensive." Hai-in didn't respond with words. She moved. To the other hunters, she was a golden blur, a streak of light executing a high-speed dash that was the hallmark of her sword dance. Her blade was aimed at Saitama's shoulder, a strike meant to test his reaction time without taking a limb. Saitama didn't move his feet. He didn't even shift his weight. Cling. The sound wasn't of metal hitting flesh. It was the sound of a high-grade magical artifact hitting an obsidian wall. Saitama had caught the edge of the blade between two fingers. He looked bored. "I told you," Saitama said, "you should be more careful with your toys." Hai-in's eyes widened. She tried to pull the sword back, but it was like it was fused to the earth itself. She channeled her full S-rank mana into her arms, the ground beneath her cracking from the pressure. Saitama didn't budge. "Is this the dance?" Saitama asked. "It's okay, I guess. But you're moving a lot just to stand still." With a gentle flick of his wrist, he released the blade. The momentum of Hai-in's own pull sent her stumbling back a dozen steps, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She looked at her sword. There were two distinct and perfectly circular indentations where his fingers had gripped the steel. The entire training ground was paralyzed. Choi Jong-in's glasses slid down his nose. He hadn't felt a single drop of mana from Saitama. No skill had been activated. No system notification had appeared. It was just raw, terrifying strength. "Anyway," Saitama said, picking up his bag, "I'll go find that public gym. Good luck with your glowing stuff." As he walked away, a shadow detached itself from a nearby pillar. Sung Jin-woo, now dressed in a simple hoodie, watched Saitama leave. His player interface was pulsing red, a new window floating in front of his eyes. Secret quest, the limitless one. Goal, witness the true strength of the anomaly. Warning: proximity to the target may result in accidental erasure from the system. Jin-woo's heart hammered against his ribs. He had just seen the fastest hunter in Korea get treated like a toddler. He realized then that Saitama wasn't a hunter, but he wasn't a monarch. He was something the system had no name for. "I need to follow him," Jin-woo whispered, his shadows, Igris and the others, flickering with a strange, primal fear. While the S-rank hunters debated the physics of a man who could catch a god-tier blade with 2 fingers, the deeper shadows of the world were beginning to stir. Within the monarchical realms, the scent of Saitama's arrival had been felt not as a presence, but as a hole in the cosmic fabric. A vacuum where the laws of the system seemed to simply cease. Beru, the former Ant King now bound to Sung Jin-woo's shadow, let out a low, guttural hiss that resonated through Jin-woo's mind like a warning siren. "My liege," Beru's voice vibrated with an uncharacteristic tremor. "The one in the yellow, he does not possess the spirit of a king, yet the very air bows before him. My instincts scream for us to flee or to worship." Jin-woo stood on a rooftop overlooking a suburban district where Saitama had just entered a modest apartment complex. He adjusted his hoodie, his eyes glowing with the faint or dark aura of the Shadow Sovereign. He could see the system windows floating around him, their red borders pulsing with increasing urgency. The system wanted Saitama categorized. It wanted him labeled. But every time Jin-woo's insight skill tried to lock on to Saitama, the data returned as a string of corrupted symbols. "He's just living his life," Jin-woo whispered, watching through his heightened senses as Saitama sat on his floor, meticulously clipping coupons from a newspaper. But he's not a monarch. He's not a ruler. He's just a guy. But the universe would not let such an anomaly remain in peace. Above the apartment complex, the sky began to bleed. A massive, jagged tear in reality, a gate far larger and darker than anything seen in Korea, began to open. This wasn't a standard dungeon. It was a localized breach, a blue gate caused by the system's desperate attempt to balance the sudden influx of Saitama's unquantifiable power by spawning an equivalent threat. Twin silhouettes emerged from the rift. They were draped in obsidian armor that seemed to swallow the afternoon sun, their eyes burning with a cold, violet light. These were high-tier demons from the higher floors of the demon castle, entities that usually required a full raid of S-rank hunters to even scratch. "Target identified," one of the demons hissed, its voice like grinding stones. "The anomaly that disrupts the architect's design. We shall purge the error." Downstairs, Saitama looked up at his ceiling. He heard the familiar, annoying sound of his roof groaning under an immense weight. He saw a small piece of plaster fall onto his dinner, a single, perfectly cooked bowl of white rice. Saitama's face went blank. The bored expression remained, but his eyes narrowed. "I just cleaned this place," he muttered. Boom! The roof of the apartment complex didn't just collapse. It was vaporized as the 2 demons descended, their mana blades drawn. They landed in Saitama's living room, their presence shattering the windows and sending a shockwave through the neighborhood. "Human!" the lead demon boomed, its aura freezing the air. "You have no level. You have no rank. You are an impossibility that must be deleted." Saitama stood up, his yellow jumpsuit slightly dusty. He didn't look at the demons. He looked at his bowl of rice, now covered in ceiling dust. "You guys," Saitama said, his voice dropping into a low, dangerous register. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get the water-to-rice ratio perfect without a digital cooker?" The demons didn't wait. They moved with a speed that exceeded the human eye, their blades glowing with soul-reaping energy. From the rooftop, Jin-woo prepared to intervene, his daggers ready. He knew these monsters were beyond an E rank. Even he would struggle to face 2 at once. "Wait, Beru," Jin-woo commanded as the ant shadow surged. "Look." Saitama didn't dodge, but he didn't even raise his arms to block. As the first demon's blade touched his collarbone, the enchanted steel didn't cut. It shattered like cheap glass. Saitama reached out, his red-gloved hand moving so fast it created a localized vacuum. He grabbed the demon's face. "Get out," Saitama said. He didn't punch, he simply pushed. The physical force of the push was equivalent to a magnitude 9 earthquake. The demon wasn't just thrown, it was launched through the wall, so through the next 3 buildings and into the horizon, becoming a small twinkling star in the afternoon sky before exploding in a distant puff of mana. The second demon froze. Its logical programming, the very essence of the system, hit a fatal error. It looked at Saitama, then at the empty space where its comrade had been. I'm a servant of the Monarchs," the demon stammered, its violet eyes flickering. "I'm a tier 9. "I don't care," Saitama interrupted. He took a single step forward. The floorboards didn't just creak, they turned to splinters. "You broke my roof, and you ruined my lunch." Saitama swung a normal punch. The resulting shockwave cleared the blue gate entirely. The rift in the sky didn't just close. The clouds for 50 miles in every direction were blown away, leaving a perfect, circular hole of blue sky amidst the overcast afternoon. The demon wasn't just killed, it was atomized, its mana signature erased from the universe. The shockwave from Saitama's normal punch didn't just clear the sky, it sent a literal ripple through the global mana detection grid. In the headquarters of the United States Hunter Bureau, the massive holographic map of the world briefly flickered entirely white before short-circuiting. Analysts stared at the screen in horror as the mana density index for Seoul, Korea, spiked to a level that technically shouldn't exist, and then immediately dropped to 0. On the rooftop, Sung Jin-woo stood perfectly still. The wind from Saitama's punch had nearly knocked his shadows out of his own silhouette. Igris, the stoic knight, was kneeling on one knee, his sword vibrating in its scabbard as if in tribute. Beru was trembling, his antennae twitching frantically. "My liege," Beru whispered. "That was not magic, that was physics. He forced the world to move out of his way." Jin-woo looked down at the ruined apartment. Saitama was standing in the center of the debris, looking at his grocery bag. Miraculously, a single carton of eggs had survived the blast. Saitama breathed a sigh of relief that was louder than the screams of the departing demons. "Well," Saitama muttered, "at least the eggs are okay. Maybe I can make an omelet in the microwave." "He's not even breathing hard," Jin-woo said to himself. He looked at the system window floating in his peripheral vision. Warning, the anomaly has completed a hidden achievement. One-sided erasure. Tan. The system is forced to recalibrate. Global difficulty increased. New gate opening, S rank, Giant's Nest. Location, Seoul Plaza. Jin-woo's eyes widened. The system was reacting like an immune system trying to kill a virus it couldn't identify. Because Saitama had cleared a high-tier breach so easily, the world's balance had shifted. To compensate for Saitama's presence, the system was dumping the most dangerous dungeons it had into the city, trying to find his limit. So he's going to accidentally destroy the city just by being here, Jin-woo realized. He jumped from the rooftop, his shadows wrapping around him as he moved toward the source of the new gate. Meanwhile, at Seoul Plaza, the ground tore open. A gate the size of a stadium erupted, and the first thing to emerge was the foot of a giant, clad in armor that looked like mountain peaks. The public screamed. Out in the S-rank hunters of the Hunters Guild and the White Tiger Guild arrived in a frenzy of siren lights and magical flares. "We have to hold the line," Choi Jong-in shouted, fire swirling around his hands. "If this thing breaks through, the whole district is..." "Excuse me." A bald man in a yellow jumpsuit walked past the S-rank perimeter. He was carrying a plastic bag and looking very annoyed. "Hey, E-rank!" Baek Yoon-ho, the White Tiger Guild master, growled. his eyes turning beast-like. "Now, get back. This is an S-rank raid. You'll be crushed just by the pressure." "I'm looking for the supermarket," Saitama said, pointing toward the street behind the Giant's Nest gate. "The Great Value Mart. It's right behind that big stone foot. Is the road closed?" The giant, a creature that could level a skyscraper with a sneeze, looked down at the small human. It raised its massive club, a weapon carved from an ancient world tree. No one swung it down with enough force to create a crater the size of a city block. Crunch. The club hit Saitama's head. The S-rank hunters winced, expecting a spray of red. Instead, the club shattered. The massive wooden weapon exploded into toothpicks, and Saitama didn't even move an inch. He didn't even drop his eggs. "I just told you," Saitama said, looking up at the 50-foot-tall monster. "I'm in a hurry. The sale ends in 15 minutes. He leapt, but it wasn't a leap, so much as it was a human-sized cannonball firing from the earth. He punched the giant in the stomach. The impact didn't just kill the creature. It turned the monster into a fine red mist that coated the entire plaza. The S-rank gate, the Giant's Nest, buckled under the atmospheric pressure of the strike and imploded, the mana core shattering before the raid could even officially begin. Saitama landed back on the pavement, his cape fluttering. Then he looked at the S-rank hunters who were standing frozen, their high-tier spells still glowing uselessly in their hands. "The road's clear now," Saitama said, checking his watch. "Oh man, 12 minutes left." He took off at a light jog, which, to everyone else, looked like a golden blur that broke the sound barrier 6 times over. Baek Yoon-so looked at Choi Jong-in. Did a bald guy just one-shot an S-rank gate because he wanted to buy discounted meat? "I think," Choi whispered. "So we need to find a new job." The light jog of Saitama was a natural disaster disguised as a commute. Every step he took toward the Great Value Mart sent localized tremors through the Seoul subway system, and the sonic booms trailing behind him shattered the windows of every Volt brand, every corporate office along the main thoroughfare. By the time he reached the sliding glass doors of the supermarket, he was panting slightly, not from exertion, but from the sheer stress of the ticking clock. "Safe," he wheezed, grabbing a red basket. 3 minutes to spare. But the world of solo leveling was not finished with him. As Saitama scanned the aisles for the legendary half-off premium Wagyu, the air inside the grocery store began to thicken. It wasn't the smell of frozen seafood. It was the suffocating, ancient pressure of the Monarch of Frost. The Monarch had watched the Giant's Nest implode from the safety of the dimensional gap. He was a being of ice and absolute zero, and a creature that viewed humans as mere insects in a frozen garden. He had seen the anomaly and decided that the system's failure was an opportunity for a true predator to intervene. "Human," a voice like cracking glaciers echoed through the aisles. The freezer section erupted, shards of ice forming into a throne in the middle of the dairy section. The Monarch of Frost sat there, his pale skin glowing with a murderous, freezing mana. "You possess a power that defies the architect, and I've come to offer you a choice. Serve the monarchs or become a frozen monument to your own arrogance." Saitama stopped in front of the meat counter. He didn't look at the Monarch. He was staring at a shelf that was tragically empty. "Excuse me," Saitama said, his voice flat. "Where's the Wagyu? The flyer said there was a sale on Wagyu." The Monarch of Frost narrowed his eyes. "You dare ignore a king? I have frozen entire worlds, and I've seen the beginning and end of—" "I don't care about your world freezing," Saitama interrupted, finally turning around. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated annoyance. "I'm asking about the steak. It's Saturday. The sale starts at 4 o'clock. It's 4:02. Why is the shelf empty?" The Monarch stood up, the floor beneath him turning into a jagged landscape of permafrost. "You will die for your insolence." He raised a hand, and a storm of obsidian ice spears manifested in the air, Artie aimed directly at Saitama's head. Green flash. Wait, wrong universe. Saitama didn't move. The spears struck him and shattered like cheap icicles against a heated radiator. The Monarch's eyes widened. He unleashed a domain of absolute zero, a skill that should have frozen the atoms of any living thing in a 5-mile radius. The grocery store's lights flickered and died. The temperature plummeted to a level that would kill an S-rank hunter instantly. Saitama just stood there, his breath barely even fogging in the air. He looked at the Monarch, then at the frozen, ruined produce. "The milk is frozen now," Saitama said, his voice dropping into that low, terrifying register that signaled the end of a conversation. "And you still haven't told me where the meat is." I'm a Monarch," the ice being screamed, realizing for the first time that his mana was being swallowed by the sheer physical presence of the man in the yellow suit. "I cannot be defeated by a common..." "Serious series," Saitama muttered. He didn't use a punch. He didn't want to destroy the store. He used a serious table flip, but on a localized scale. He slammed his foot into the ground. The localized shockwave didn't destroy the building. It simply inverted the Monarch's own reality. The Monarch of Frost was launched upward through the ceiling, through the atmosphere, and into the vacuum of space, such where his absolute zero would finally have some peace and quiet. The ice in the store instantly sublimated, turning into a harmless mist. A terrified store clerk crawled out from behind the counter. I think the Wagyu is in the back. We hadn't put it out yet because of the ice guy." Saitama's face instantly returned to its bored, neutral state. "Oh, cool. Can I get 2 packs? No, make it 3. Outside, Jin-woo arrived at the supermarket, his daggers drawn and his shadows ready for a cosmic war. He felt the residual mana of a Monarch, a power that should have signaled the end of the city, and then he felt it vanish. Jin-woo walked into the store. He saw the ruined ceiling. He saw the mist. And then he saw Saitama standing at the checkout line with 3 packs of Wagyu and a carton of, now thawed, eggs. Warning, the anomaly has defeated a Monarch in under 60 seconds. The system is experiencing a critical logic failure. Earns a new quest. Do not provoke the anomaly. Just don't. Jin-woo looked at the quest and slowly put his daggers away. "I think," he whispered to Igris, "we should just help him carry his bags." The departure of the Monarch of Frost was not a quiet affair. Even though the serious table flip had been localized, the displacement of air required to launch a primordial being into orbit created a vacuum that sucked the surrounding mana into a singularity. For a brief second, every hunter in Seoul felt their powers flicker, as if a giant had just inhaled the city's magic. Jin-woo stood in the dairy aisle, watching the anomaly count out his change to a trembling cashier. To the Shadow Sovereign, Saitama didn't look like a threat. He looked like a person who had transcended the very concept of the system. The blue windows floating around Jin-woo are now a chaotic mess of static and error codes. "Excuse me," Jin-woo said, stepping forward. His voice was calm, but his shadows, Igris, Iron, and Tank, were practically vibrating with a primal need to retreat. You just fought a Monarch. Do you even know what that was?" Saitama looked up from his receipt, squinting at the dark-haired youth. "A Monarch? Was that the guy in the bathrobes with the ice habit? I thought he was just a really aggressive cosplayer trying to steal the last of the meat." "He was one of the beings that wants to destroy this world," Jin-woo explained, his eyes narrowing. "And you treated him like a nuisance." "Well, he was a nuisance," Saitama replied, slinging his grocery bags over his shoulder. "He ruined the air conditioning. Anyway, you're that guy from the subway. That's you, right? The player, or whatever. You should really work on your posture. You look like you're carrying a lot of stress." Jin-woo paused. He was carrying the fate of humanity on his shoulders, leveling up through a brutal, blood-soaked system. And here was a man telling him to fix his posture. "I'm Sung Jin-woo. I'm like you. I'm trying to protect people." "Cool," Saitama said, walking toward the exit. "But don't get too caught up in the protecting bit. And if you get too obsessed with being a hero, you'll go bald. Trust me on that one." Before Jin-woo could respond, the sky outside turned a bruised, sickly purple. This wasn't a gate. It was a complete atmospheric collapse. The absolute being, the creator of the solo-leveling universe, had finally taken notice. The system was a simulation designed to find a successor, a war game between rulers and monarchs. Saitama wasn't a player. He was a glitch that was threatening to delete the entire save file. And a massive, ethereal hand, composed of pure starlight and cosmic law, reached down from the clouds. It didn't aim for the city. It aimed specifically for the grocery store parking lot. The rulers, the angelic counterparts to the monarchs, manifested in a choir of blinding light, their 6 wings spanning miles. "The error must be corrected," a voice boomed, sounding like 10,000 trumpets. "The limitless one does not belong in the cycle." The rulers unleashed a command of authority, a psychic weight meant to force every living soul to their knees. Jin-woo felt the pressure, his shadow sovereign powers flaring to resist the celestial mandate. But Saitama just adjusted his grip on his bag of wagyu. "Hey!" Saitama shouted up at the sky, his face turning sharp and serious. "I don't know who you are, but I've had a really long day. I fought a rock statue, and I fought some demons. I fought an ice guy, and I almost missed the sale. If you're here to break my eggs, I'm going to get actually mad." "We are the will of the universe," the rulers thundered. "Then the universe needs to learn some manners," Saitama muttered. He looked at Jin-woo. "Hey kid, hold these. If a single egg breaks, I'm holding you responsible." Saitama handed the grocery bags to a stunned Jin-woo and began to squat. The pavement beneath his red boots didn't just crack, and it turned into a fine powder. The air around him began to scream as the atmospheric pressure tripled. "Wait!" Jin-woo yelled. "Those are the rulers. You can't just..." Boom! Saitama didn't fly. He launched. The force of his jump sent a shockwave that leveled every abandoned car in a 3-block radius. He became a golden needle piercing the purple sky, heading straight for the cosmic hand that dared to interrupt his Saturday evening. The sky above Seoul didn't just break. It shattered like a mirror struck by a sledgehammer. As Saitama ascended, the command of authority issued by the rulers, a psychic weight that could pin a monarch to the tectonic plates, snapped. To the rulers, it felt as though a physical law had been revoked. The bald man wasn't resisting their will. He simply didn't acknowledge that a will could be stronger than his momentum. Jin-woo stood in the epicenter of the shockwave, so shielding the grocery bags with his own body. He looked up, his shadow sovereign eyes tracking the golden streak. The system was no longer sending warning windows. The interface was a flickering strobe of red and black, screaming a single word over and over: error. High in the mesosphere, the rulers converged. Their leader, a being of blinding radiance known as the brightest fragment of brilliant light, raised a spear of pure cosmic energy. "Anomaly," the ruler thundered, whilst the vibrations shaking the very stars. "You are a critical failure in the design. You will be consumed by the light." Saitama, soaring through the thinning atmosphere, didn't use a flashy move. He didn't have a secret technique passed down through generations. He just pulled back his right fist. "I'm tired," Saitama said, his voice a low hum against the whistling wind. "Of the destiny talk, of the cycles talk. I just wanted a quiet dinner." Serious series, serious punch. The impact didn't make a sound at first, there was a moment of absolute, terrifying stillness as the physical force of Saitama's fist met the combined magical output of the rulers and the absolute being's divine hand. Then the universe blinked. A shockwave of pure, non-magical kinetic energy erupted from the point of impact. It didn't just disperse the purple clouds, it scoured the atmosphere clean for thousands of miles. The ethereal hand of the absolute being didn't just retreat, so it fractured, the starlight leaking out like blood. The rulers were sent spiraling through dimensions, their 6 wings singed by the sheer friction of the air being shoved out of the way. The system, the complex reality warping machine that governed the gates, the levels, and the players, hit a terminal exception. The blue screens in front of Jin-woo's eyes turned white, then vanished entirely. Down on the ground, the gates across Korea didn't just close, they evaporated, and the monsters inside were expelled back to their realms, and the mana density of the world stabilized into a calm, natural state. The war between the rulers and monarchs hadn't been won or lost. It had been interrupted by a man who was bored of the plot. Saitama descended, his white cape acting as a makeshift parachute, though he landed with the grace of a falling skyscraper. He touched down in the middle of the ruined parking lot, his yellow suit slightly charred but otherwise intact. He walked over to Jin-woo, who was still holding the bags of wagyu as if they were holy relics. "The eggs?" Saitama asked, his voice filled with more genuine concern than he had shown during the entire battle with the rulers. Jin-woo looked into the bag. He checked the carton. They're fine. Not a single crack. Saitama exhaled a breath that sounded like a hurricane subsiding. Oh, thank God. I don't think I could have handled another trip back into that store, and the lines were getting long. The world around them began to settle. The purple sky returned to a soft evening orange. The oppressive weight of the player status felt different now. The system was still there, but it was quiet, humbled. "What now?" Jin-woo asked, looking at his hands. He could still feel his shadows, but the desperate need to level up had vanished. The ceiling of the world had been punched through, and suddenly the room felt much bigger. Now. Saitama reached into the bag and handed Jin-woo a pack of the half-off wagyu. "Now we eat. You looks like you could use some protein, kid. And seriously, fix that posture. You're going to have back problems by the time you're my age." The evening sun dipped below the horizon of a soul that felt fundamentally different. The jagged neon blue windows of the system had ceased their frantic flickering, settling into a dormant state that no longer demanded blood or growth. For the first time since the first gate opened, the world was quiet. There was no hum of mana, no distant screech of dungeon beasts, only the sound of a plastic bag rustling in the wind. Saitama led the way back toward his partially roofless apartment, though his gait a casual stroll that belied the fact that he had just punched a hole through the will of the universe. Behind him, Sung Jin-woo walked in a daze, carrying the wagyu like a sacred artifact. The Shadow Sovereign, the man destined to become the ultimate predator of the stars, found himself relegated to a grocery assistant, and strangely, he didn't mind. "So," Jin-woo started, his voice hesitant. "That thing in the sky, you didn't just beat them, you broke the system. My quests, they're gone. The level-up notifications have stopped." "Good," Saitama said, not looking back. "Getting stronger shouldn't feel like a chore. Besides, if you keep leveling up just because a floating screen tells you to, you'll eventually run out of things to do. Then you'll end up like me, staring at the ceiling wondering if a giant monster will ever actually be a challenge again." They reached the ruins of the apartment. Saitama stepped over a fragment of a demon's obsidian armor and headed straight for the kitchen. Despite the missing roof, the gas stove still worked. "You know," Saitama continued, expertly cracking an egg into a bowl, "people in this world are obsessed with ranks. S rank, E rank. It's all just labels to make people feel better or worse about themselves. But in the end, a punch is just a punch, and it doesn't matter what level the guy throwing it is. Jin-woo watched as the man who had erased a monarch began to meticulously saute the discounted wagyu. The aroma of searing beef filled the air, clashing with the scent of ozone and celestial debris. System log, final entry. Balance found. The anomaly has rendered the game obsolete. Conclusion: survival is no longer a quest, it is a choice. The blue screen faded for the last time. Jin-woo felt a weight lift from his chest, not the weight of the rulers, but the weight of expectation. He looked at Saitama, who was now triumphantly holding up a plate of steak and eggs. "Dinner's served," Saitama announced. "Grab a seat, or a piece of rubble, whatever's comfortable." As they ate, the world outside began to rebuild. The Hunter Association would spend decades trying to explain what happened that day. They would call it the Great Reset. They would search for the bald man in the yellow suit, but they would never find him. Saitama didn't want to be found. He just wanted to make sure he didn't miss the next sale. In the end, the solo leveling universe wasn't destroyed by Saitama. It was liberated. By removing the rigid mechanics of the system and humbling the cosmic entities that viewed Earth as a chessboard, Saitama gave humanity something more valuable than mana, the chance to define their own strength. Sung Jin-woo remained the Shadow Sovereign, but he was no longer a puppet of the Architect. He became a guardian who understood that true power isn't about the number above your head, but the discipline in your heart. And somewhere in a small, nondescript apartment with a patched-up roof, a bald man sat in front of a TV complaining that the weather was too hot for a hero costume. But neither rulers nor monarchs could stand against the ultimate reality of a man who simply trained too hard. More legends await, owing to have back problems by the time you're my age. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.